Okay. Hello, friends. I'm Chris McMillon with Autonomy Season One, and I'm here with James Corbett of the CorbettReport.com. James, thank you very much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late for our conversation. Maybe there's an object lesson in there for us.
No problem whatsoever. The Autonomy course, it's a course that's hosted by Richard Grove at tragedyandhope.com, and it offers three main features: intensive education, dynamic learning environment, and immersive mentorship. Now, the intensive education is not hard to find out there. What makes this course unique is the immersive mentorship and the dynamic learning environment. Now, one of the many skills that are covered on this course is the art of becoming an autodidactic, or being able to teach yourself anything. Meta learning, if you like, learning how to learn, which also, and how this leads to hyper learning, which means to, for anyone who doesn't know out there, to take that out to the next level, to make it on a massive scale using the internet. So my question for you is, what I'd like to know is, well, your ability to take extremely complicated and topics, and present them in such an interesting and informative way. That's made you one of the most highly regarded researchers and presenters over the past, was it 12, 13 years you started the Corbett Report? Was it 2006, wasn't it?
2007.
Yeah, 2007. So my question is, could you tell us a little bit about how you learned? How did you learn to become such an effective researcher during the early days of the Corbett Report? Was it trial and error? Was there any formal training in the process? Were you even aware of terms like meta learning, the Trivium, or hyper learning, any of that?
Well, I was aware of autodidacticism at any rate. And I think I often poo-poo my postgraduate or my post-secondary education in general. I went to the University of Calgary and got a BA in English literature, and then I went to the University of Trinity College Dublin in Dublin, Ireland, to study Anglo-Irish literature. And I often poo-poo that and say it wasn't really even worth the price of the paper that the diploma was printed on, the degree. But having said that, I suppose to a certain extent what I do in terms of composing podcasts and articles is similar. In a sense, I'm continuing to write essays like I did back in university, but now it's just for a different medium. So I think in terms of research, how to research and how to organize and put things together into a coherent argument, I've had a lot of experience with that, at least in terms of my formal standard education. In terms of presenting that in a podcast format, turning that into a podcast that's listenable, let alone enjoyable, that's not the right word, but I think you know what I'm getting at. That was a process that took many years, and I'm still learning things as I go along. And that has been completely self-taught. I had no formal training whatsoever in any of the tools that I use. So I tend to, if I'm recording just audio, I just use a program like Audacity. It's freeware. It's very simple, very basic, but it works, and that's good enough for me. But even something as simple and basic as that, it took me a few years. I think it was Richard Grove who tipped me to the existence of a program called Levelator, which I had no idea existed. I didn't know what it was or why it was important. But then suddenly all this audio that's being recorded at different levels can be evened out. So it's a nice, smooth listening experience for people. Now I levelate everything I do because it is one of the handiest tools I have. It's, again, freeware that I got tipped into by Richard Grove. It's things like that. Over the years, you just learn, oh, I do this and it comes out this way. Well, that's better. I'll start doing this. And you just add it to the workflow. So if you go back and listen to the very, 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 very first Corbett reports, terrible audio quality, terrible presentation. I didn't know how to even talk in front of a microphone properly. It's a question of just doing it again and again and again and again, and learning and piecing it together and finding a workflow that works. And that can take a long time. You can do it quickly if you have people like Richard Grove and others giving you the tips and pointing you in the right direction. But it is a process of trial and error to a large extent in terms of just the presentation of these podcasts.
Yeah, one of the overlying topics that Richard has really impounded into us is failing. The more you fail, the more times you fail, the faster you're going to succeed. If you don't fail 100 times, how are you going to get anywhere? So,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not an impetuous person, but I'm usually very meticulous. But I consciously, when I started the website, I knew I'm just not going to be the perfectionist and wait till everything is perfect before I release anything. That you'll never ever get anywhere doing that. So I just stepped it up to 11 and kept doing it and cranking it out as fast as I could. And in that process learning, which is why if you go way back in the archives, I think you'll see the presentation was quite a bit different back in the day. But you live and you learn and you improve and you go forward. And that really is the best way to do it. Just put it out there and just keep going. And that's my main it's thing that I've learned over the years, over top of all of these programs and all of this other stuff. But the main thing I've learned is just put it out there and just keep going. Don't wait for everything to be perfect.
Yeah, I seem to remember not too long ago, I did actually listen to one of the older podcasts right from the beginning. You tipped it off and I went back to look at it. It was one of your shows and you said refer to that. And I did immediately notice you kind of were like, hello, this is James Corbett. And and it sounded fine, but
yeah, I can't listen to it now. It makes me cringe.
Yeah, trial and error. Obviously, what you were doing, yeah, you're right. The technical side is irrelevant to the message that you're getting out there. So that's very important. I wanted to ask you about the Trivium method specifically. At which point did you first hear about it? And when you're doing research, do you consciously, how often, or if at all, do you consciously apply it when you say, okay, have I covered this? Okay, this, and eliminating the contradictions? And I don't know, do you consciously apply it to much of your work?
Right. No, I don't consciously use that as a model. I first heard of it in, I think, 2008, 2009, again, through Richard Grove and the Tragedy and Hope Connection. But it is just the basic building blocks of learning that I think, I don't know how, but I think anyone who gets, this is where it comes into play, because there are 3 different levels of understanding a subject. And this is something that you learn through teaching, in fact. And that relates back to me being an English teacher here in Japan. And again, when I came out to Japan for the first time, I didn't have any experience in teaching. I didn't study teaching or anything. So I just went in the deep end and started teaching people and learned through trial and error, once again, what to do and what not to do when you're teaching people. And things that are so obvious from my perspective now were really, I didn't really think about it. I didn't know about it. From the teacher's perspective, I know this, it's very basic and easy, so we can just kind of glance over that and get to the good stuff. No, from the student's perspective, no, you have to lay it out and you have to really make sure they get those basics. So then you build on top of that, and then you build on top of that. And it's the question of structuring it that way, which again is not necessarily intuitive, is this kind of thing that I learned. So I don't know, it's just a meta process of learning and discovering, but I realized, okay, you've got facts and ideas and dates and things that are just, that's the kind of the essence that you're working from. But how do you put it together? Well, there's the grammar. And so we have to find a way to connect these things. And anytime you form a narrative like that, you're taking certain facts and then these facts don't fit into that narrative. So it's always a process of constructing it. And does this make sense? And then asking yourself, well, now that I've put this together in this way, does this help me understand the world better? Does this help me live my life better? Does this improve something in some way? Once you have that, then it's the third level of the rhetoric of how do I convey this to other people? And they often say that if you want to know if you really understand a subject, try to teach it to someone else. I can tell you from experience, that's true. If I didn't have this podcast and wasn't trying to construct this and present it in a way that's understandable to other people, it's hard to appreciate just how difficult that is and how well you have to know a subject matter to be able to do that in an effective way. But once you do, and again, this is the thing that you learn by doing, because once you've done that and once you've constructed something and you've taken a complex subject and you've really delved into it and then you put it together and present something coherent on it, when you do that effectively, what that is and how much work goes into that and then what the finished product looks like. And that is essentially the Trivium model, but I don't consciously think of it as that. That's just the way that I do it. I collect the facts, I find the narrative, I present the narrative, and there it is right there. But that is the building blocks of how to do this. And it's not something that's ever taught specifically in the public indoctrination system. It's something that maybe you get a taste of when you're doing presentations and things to the class, but they never put it in that context. So it never lets you really sit back and realize what it is you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You will not be taught the Trivium in any public school, as far as I know. Your story is not unlike mine. I went to Spain to teach English when I was 23, and I threw myself to the wolves. I had no idea what I was doing, and you figure it out as you go. I ended up staying there teaching English for 18 years, in fact. So yeah, I can definitely relate. You learn best by teaching. Have you developed any successful habits over the years that's helped you organize your projects, your time, your life in general, anything to do with time management, sleep, dietary, any of that? Anything you want to share on that front?
My trick for the first decade or so of the website was just not to sleep. I really delved into it. And especially in the first 4 years of the website, I was teaching full-time and doing this at night, essentially. So yeah, it involved a lot of, if not sleepless nights, at least very little sleep. And that is not an advisable way to do this. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. I suppose it was good for building the website and to getting my stuff out there. But yeah, it's probably going to shave a few years off of my life. Now, in the last few years, I've had a family. So when that comes along, of course, that changes the time management perspective on everything. It also involved some sleepless nights in the first couple of years of my children's lives. But now that we're settling into the new routine as my children are getting older and I'm starting to get the handle of the work-family balance, I have carved out certain spaces of my day that, well, I know I'm going to be with my family, so I'm going to disconnect. I'm not going to be checking my email or having a device ringing in my ear at all times. So I've carved out those certain spaces of the day, and I still practice and experiment with different things. I mean, why not try different things? And what I've tried from basically the beginning of this year is now, instead of getting my kids ready for bed and getting them off to bed and then going and working for another few hours and then crawling bleary-eyed into bed and waking up in a few hours after that and then napping in the day. It was just this crazy lifestyle that wasn't working for me. So in the last few months, I've been going to bed with my family at 9 p.m. and then waking up really early in the morning, sometimes 4 or 5, sometimes 6 a.m., whatever it is, and then getting some work done in the morning before my family is up and going. And that actually I found is actually a better way to do it. Because I'm more refreshed. I actually have a good night's sleep and I'm still, able to do work. But then secondarily, I found the morning time is actually more productive for me than the evening time, especially evening time when you're so tired anyway, you're just forcing yourself to stay awake. You're not going to be that productive. So in the morning, you're fresh, you can get things done, and it's before anyone else in the world is, well, not in the world, but around is awake and operating, so I can just focus on whatever it is I've got to do. I found that's my best way yet. But as I say, I'm still experimenting, and it changes depending on the family dynamic and, what stage of life you're at and all of that stuff. Maybe when you're in your 20s, staying up till 3 a.m. and waking up at 7 is doable, but not by the time you're approaching middle age.
Yeah. How old are your kids now?
My boy is just about to turn 6. My girl is just about to turn 3.
That's great. Yeah. Again, my son's 8 and my daughter's just turned 7. It's great. And that actually leads up to my next question. What are your thoughts on homeschooling, and what's the homeschooling situation like in Japan?
Homeschooling, as you might imagine in a society like Japan, is not very common. There are organizations and communities that do it, but it is extremely uncommon here. It is possible, though. I will say that. We are not going that route, interestingly enough. But I've talked about it on my program before, and I think it is certainly the ideal setup for certain family situations, if all things being equal. For our particular family situation, I just don't think it's going to be ideal. But I also look at it from the perspective that I'm not a defeatist about the idea of public education, because I am a product of public education. And although there were certainly points in there that were pure indoctrination, whatever way it was, I managed to overcome that indoctrination. And I think that's an important part of it. And part of it, of course, is being in a social environment that's part of your family environment when you're growing up as well. And I think it's, I don't know if you necessarily have to, but it is interesting, I think, to have the different perspectives that are coming at that age where you're being told by the authority figures, you must believe this and you must believe that. And if your parents are not on board with that, well, then what does that create? It creates a space for at least questioning. And my fundamental approach to the idea of raising my children is I'm not going to tell them what to believe. I'm not going to tell them you have to think this or you have to think that. No, the process of them discovering what to believe and what to think and how to do that is infinitely more important. So teaching my children, if they have a question, well, how do you answer that question? Can you experiment with something, or can you look something up, or what sources do you take information from? That is really where the education happens. And if you build that into the sort of the educational DNA of your children, I think that's the thing that will see them through life more so than here is the fact, and here is a fact, and here is a fact, and you must believe this and you must believe that. No, it's about the process of learning. And if you can instill that in children, they can get through anything, even public education.
I was blown away that the documentary that you've recommended so many times over the years, Children Full of Life. What was it called? Yeah.
Yep. Children Full of
Life. Yeah, I've always said we homeschool, but I always said to myself, that would be an exception. If we could get a teacher like that, I'd be glad to send my kids to school.
Yeah. And having worked in the Japanese public education system, I can tell you there are some teachers, maybe not like that, but there are teachers that are exceptional teachers, and where you can tell they were born to be teachers and they are excellent and they know exactly what to do. And then there are teachers on the exact opposite end. You just think, how did you ever become a teacher? Why are you doing this? This is terrible. And then there's most teachers are in the middle somewhere, as you would imagine, right? There are the exceptional standouts, though. And I think, I don't know about yourself. I came up in the public education system, so I can think back to, I had that teacher. That was the great teacher that inspired me and made me want to go that way and think about these things. So I think they exist. They're out there. But and hopefully they can be the guiding lights for an education system that is full of maybe people who shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. My memories mostly revolve around sports. And the social aspect was very important. With homeschoolers, that's usually our biggest challenge, is finding a good social group of fellow like-minded homeschoolers to grow up together, to spend time together, to create the same kind of memories that that we got growing up in the school system. But yeah, it's a complicated topic.
Yeah, that's one of the factors here, is that as I say, there are some organizations and things in the population centers, but we live in kind of a rural area where there isn't a lot of support for that.
Okay. Do you ever see yourself going back to Canada?
At this point, it's difficult to imagine. We've got a house and a family here, so I've thought about it before in the past, but I actually haven't even thought about it in years. I don't really care about it from any perspective other than friends and family, obviously, I miss. But in terms of everything else, I'm happy where I am in Japan, so I don't have any compelling, need to get back to Canada.
A question just occurred to me. I just watched your recent questions for Corbett, and you mentioned your parents came over. Since they came over, where did they come from?
From England, northern England, the Newcastle area to be precise. So they came in the 1970s. I want to say 72, I think, before I was born, when my brother was maybe 1.5 years old or something like that. 1 year old. Yeah, they got up and moved to an entirely different continent, which was an amazing thing to do. And the way my dad tells the story, he's a structural steel detailer, so he was working in a drafting office, and he knew the fabricator he was working for, they're going south. The economy was going south at that time, and the European England was talking about joining the European Economic Community, and he just saw the writing on the wall. So he's like, this isn't. So he's looking through the paper one day, and he sees an ad for drafting jobs in Canada. And the way he tells the story, he looked at my mom, who was ironing some shirts at the time or something, and he said, "Do you want to go to Canada?" And she's like, "Oh, okay." And that was it. And so they take their 1-year-old at that time and they move to Canada. And I think it was like a year after that, the office that my dad was working in England ended up closing down, and everyone got laid off. So he made the right move.
Yeah. So they were like their son James. They were able to predict the future. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I've talked about that before, kind of tongue in cheek, but kind of not. I mean, predicting the future isn't always about crystal balls and goblins and ghouls and whatever. It's about understanding, just seeing what's happening and being able to place it into a context. And if your roadmap for reality is good enough, you might be able to at least not, not predicting dates or anything, but the trends, and that's the important part.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of dark trends happening right now with the rise of technocracy and everything else involved in that area. James, that pretty much wraps up my questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to myself, and of course, my fellow autonomy students will be looking forward to hearing what you've had to say about all that. Is there anything else you want to add before I close?
Again, I think the ultimate number one takeaway is, there's lots of like technical things and that you learn along the way, but the most important thing is just to do what it is you're doing. Have a sense of why you're doing it. If it's genuinely important to you, keep that in mind and keep that with you, because again, depending on what it is, but in terms of the podcasting world, once you start to get an audience, you're going to have people in your ear every single day telling you what to say or not to say, what to think, what not to think, how to dress, how to act, how to talk, how not to talk. I just got an email. Don't talk with your hands so much, James. It looks like you're making, evil occult gestures and things. I don't know. I am who I am. I'm just going to present the information the way that I am. And I know who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I keep that with me. And that's an important part of this. Don't let other people divert you from your path. If you're starting out on something new or taking a different direction, sometimes your friends or your family won't be supportive of that. Sometimes they won't understand what it is you're doing. They won't give you the kind of feedback you need. You just have to continue doing what it is you want to do, and know what it is you want to do, and just keep doing it and put it out there. Don't wait for everything to be perfect or everything to line up. You put it out there and things will start to happen. And I can say that from experience. So that's the most important advice I have for people who are thinking of starting out something new.
This autonomy class has been amazing for everyone taking it. Richard has really taken so many people without a plan or direction, and now everybody is people are getting their shows up and running, getting their books written, getting their businesses up and running. All the skills that he has acquired over the years, he's sharing them with us, and it's been an incredible experience.
Awesome. I love to hear that, and I'm so glad for what Richard is doing. This is the next step, because it's one thing to know about all the terrible things that are happening and things that are being done to us, but the real question is, what can we do? And you guys in the class are doing it right now, and that's the important step.
Yeah, we are, and we're all meeting at the Red Pill Expo in June, so looking forward to that. Are you speaking this year? I know you've spoken in the past.
Yeah, I'm speaking via video remote. I'm not going to be there, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, well, we definitely look forward to that. I really appreciate you taking the time again today. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.